In this video, I will be explaining an SCP that kinda got me into the actual Foundation way back in the day. It's one that you might not have heard of, but nonetheless is truly horrifying. If you come into contact with this SCP, you'll be able to see through your eyes, but not control anything else your body does forever, and you'll essentially be a puppet to its will. The SCP that does all this is known only as the Slow Burn Sloth, and today I'll be explaining all that is known about it. How it controls humanity, how it devours human minds, and how, if it gets on the internet, it might take over the world. Good thing that hasn't happened yet. If that sounds cool, drop a like for me to explain more SCPs. I love doing these things, and I hope you all enjoy it as well. Without more talking, let's go ahead and get into the explanation, shall we? SCP-2774, or better known as the Slow Burn Sloth, is a very unusual creature as far as the SCP lore goes. And there's a ton of unusual creatures in the SCP lore, but this one might take the cake as a top 5 weird one. Physically, the SCP appears as an unknown humanoid type entity that seems to be wearing a sloth costume. The entity manifests itself in different types of consumable media, with the goal of people, or its victims, watching that media or reading that media and looking at itself with their eyes. Essentially, it puts an image of itself in this non-live media and hopes that people will stare at it. The sloth will appear on various types of media that are not live. So things like movies and TV shows, or colored newspapers or magazines. In even rarer cases, the sloth can show up in pictures or videos that you take. It's unknown how it does this, but it just does. Now, as I said in the intro, still to this day, there have been no instances in the SCP universe of this creature making it onto the internet. It can't seem to do that, which is good, because that would probably ruin the entire world and it could control everybody if it went viral or something. And there's only been one instance ever of the creature showing up in a live TV broadcast, but I'll mention that later. The sloth is mimetic in nature, and it affects around 40% of those people who see it. So if like 100 people look at it in whatever media it is, only 40% of those people will get symptoms. And if you're one of those unlucky 40%, here's what you might experience if you see it. Those affected from seeing the sloth will lose all ability to use their cognitive functions, like thinking or walking or moving or anything, and they will lose all capability to make higher level decisions. So you can't think, you can't decide the future, and you can't do any of that stuff. However, during all this, the victim will still be able to see through their own eyes and take in what's happening. They simply just won't be able to control or move or do anything else but see. It's like you're taking a back seat for your own life, and you can witness it, but you can't change it. And like I said, victims can't control anything, and that's where the sloth comes in. You see, these people who witness the sloth's image in this media essentially will be puppets after they give into the symptoms, and the sloth will be the puppet master, pulling the strings and making their bodies do whatever it wants. They move where the sloth wants them to. They think what the sloth wants them to think. They behave how the sloth wants them to, all while helplessly watching beyond their own eyes. Victims of SCP-2774 have just 150 seconds each 24 hours to have normal brain function. It seems that the sloth gives up control for that 150 seconds each day and relinquishes it back to the people. However, this time occurs randomly, it cannot be guessed, it cannot be predicted, and in those 150 seconds, while the victim gains back sentience, yes, they usually are panicked and distraught and crying and screaming because of the horrible situation they're in. They usually can't do anything but scream. You're being controlled fully by a sloth. So, well, not even really a sloth, it's something behind a sloth costume, but you get it. Only one single time in the SCP record has this Slow Burn Sloth appeared on a live TV broadcast. And like I said, it's never been on the internet either, so it's incapable of reaching masses, but it still can reach people that read non-live media. But that single incident occurred in northern Canada, and after this event, 4,000 people were moved to an SCP site for containment. after witnessing the sloth. The sloth appeared on a TV news channel broadcast in northern Canada, and just by those 4,000 people seeing the sloth in the background of the show, they were infected. So how can one avoid the slow burn sloth? How can you get out and not see it? Because it appears randomly, you can't guess when it appears, and you can't guess what it's going to appear on. Well, the image of the sloth only keeps its effects if that image or video has hues of red or green, so if it's colored. And because of this, people who have color blindness are not affected by this SCP at all, and they can look at its image or they can look at its video pretty much all day and nothing happens. You can also look at the images of this creature if they are edited to be black and white, because even editing can fix it, and the mimetic properties do not affect victims if they're edited. So if you're colorblind or if you see an edit, you're fine. But if you're not, and you don't see it on an edit, then you might be screwed. Sorry. You can also avoid this SCP by just ignoring non-live media. Don't read magazines, don't read books, don't do any of that stuff, which, to be fair, a lot of people don't do that because it's 2025, which sucks. People need to read more. Get back into the books, everybody. The sloth has this very uncanny visage and just overall appearance, especially since it's not a sloth at all. That's just a costume. It's like a mascot or something. It's whatever is inside of that sloth suit that we should be worried about. Its eyes are lifeless and soulless, and you just get this awful, horrible feeling from it just by looking at pictures. The motives of the sloth are also not known as of right now, but how often it appears has actually been extensively studied by the SCP Foundation, and what they found is pretty interesting. You see, it's believed that the instances of this SCP are more frequent as the number of its victims increases. So the more people that it affects, the more it'll appear to new people, and so on. So after that broadcast in Canada, when 4,000 people saw it, many more people after that claimed to see it again. But after all that was settled, the number kind of calmed down. When a victim is under the control of the sloth, they completely lack emotion and purpose or anything like that. They appear to be terrified and husks of their former selves, and they can only slowly move and answer very basic questions. They're not in control of themselves, they're just watching in the backseat while the sloth is driving. Now, the best way to remove these victims is via lethal injection, because as of right now, there's no way to get rid of the sloth's control or to sever that connection in any way. That being said, the sloth is very powerful. I mean, if it can control people's minds and bodies from a distance, just by them looking at him, I can't imagine like what else he could do. Just nobody tell him about the internet. That would be bad. But like I said way back in the beginning, this SCP is unlike most. You know, it doesn't utilize modern tech, doesn't do any of that stuff. It only appears in non-live media, and still under half the people that see it are actually affected by it. Only 40% will suffer the fate of being a puppet, and no one knows why it's only 40%. That doesn't make any sense. But I guess we can just be glad it's not 100%. Its goals are unknown, what it is unknown, what lies beyond the sloth is unknown, where it's from, what its allegiances lie. We just don't know. All we know is what I told you. Alright, that was it for this SCP explanation. I really like the Slow Burn Sloth. It was one of them that got me back into the SCP Foundation 5 or 6 years ago. Such a cool concept. It's definitely different, but I hope you still enjoyed it. And if you did and you want more SCPs, please leave a like on the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And if you want me to continue to go over more stuff like this, just let me know in the comments what I should talk about. Internet horror, analog horror, you know, SCP Foundation, Leon Invincible creatures, Trevor Innocent creatures, literally any internet creepy thing I'll be talking about here. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Love and appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure you check out the description below for my second channel, Toogly, my third channel, Spoogly, and my Twitter, my Instagram, and all that stuff. Thank you so much for everything. I love you all. Make sure you tell somebody you love them too, because life is too short not to do that, guys. Come on now. We got to do it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.